he brought me in and was like, wait, we're putting you on scholarship. And I was just like, holy smokes, got to call dad right after that and be like, Dad, what would you do with an extra 30 grand,
That's
and
what you
so,
said?
yeah,
That was your line?
yeah.
What did he say?
uh, he didn't know what I was talking about. He's like, did you just win a scratch off? I was like, no, I didn't. But I did win the college football lottery.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I am your host, Yogi Roth, and week one, it's in the books. It was a little extended. I know we even have a game on Monday, but we are talking all things college football through the lens of the West Coast as I bring in Jim Thornby, the co-founder of Y Option. That lens is looking pretty clean, brother, after the Trojans got a sick win. I'd argue one of the biggest wins on the West Coast since Oregon went to Columbus and ran up and down the field against Ohio State. I think it was 2021 without two of their best defenders. This was epic. How are you? How was your first weekend? What is happening? We got a lot to get to.
It was. I texted you on Saturday morning, and I was like, "This is weird." Like, it was my first unaffiliated, quote unquote, college football Saturday since 2011. So, I had no game plan of like what I was going to watch and when I was going to watch. I just kind of, the screen that I'm staring at right now, I had all the games kind of windows open. I probably had at most times like 6 or 7 games up at the same time, which if you're watching 7 games, are you really watching any? But enough to kind of keep track of everything that was going on and stuff like that. But yeah, it was wild, and it was good to see the West Coast teams really bring it, and not just the West Coast teams, which we can get a little later, but some of our our former friends on the West Coast that this year are now playing at East Coast schools. They brought it as well.
Yeah, there's it's been really fun. I'll say from my lens, it was an absolute blast. Now, I'm not necessarily used to like waking up early to watch like every snap of the big noon kickoff game. Like usually like I'm getting a workout in, you're having breakfast, you're just keeping an eye on it. But now as I'm working for the Big Ten Network, there's always pretty much a Big Ten game on at 9 a.m. So glued to that, watching Penn State, West Virginia, and so on and so forth throughout the night. I went to bed, I want to say around 1:30 a.m. Sunday morning after talking to Ashley Adamson, because that's like right when she got off the air, like around 3 a.m. Central Time. Props to Ash. She absolutely crushed it. Just absolutely crushed it on the Big Ten Network, along with a bunch of our colleagues, Dave Revson and company. So that was really fun. I'll say being in Eugene, and it might just be recency bias, I don't know, or it might be the fact that we had a sky cam, but it was such an enjoyable night of football, watching and calling Idaho. Yes, Idaho and Jason Eck and Dan Lanning and national championship contending Oregon Ducks. Because Jim, it was just a game. Like, it was a really fun game to call. First time for me as well. Like, I walked into the TV truck, I didn't know anybody. And I'm used to knowing everybody's name and their kids' names. So that was really kind of hit me in the face. Like, all right, let's go compete. And just got to know a bunch of guys, try to learn something about them every week. We had a camera meeting, which I love, got to kind of set the stage for what we think is going to happen in the game. And then we had a great finish and just a real fun night on Saturday, which leads us to yesterday and USC beating LSU, which leads us to today, as we will announce every week. Sunday, right? Jim, Sunday, I think we're going to do these.
Yeah, I think we're going to do them on Sunday. Today, obviously with the Sunday night game, we kind of push this one. But I think it's mostly going to be on Sundays. We're going to put out our weekly awards, which is definitely a distinct and unique look at weekly awards. I oversaw the Pac-12 weekly awards the last 3 years. I voted on nominated others for other organizations the last several years. But this one, we're having a little bit, just have a little fun with it, because college football, again, we've brought this up many times. It's supposed to be fun.
That's right. So it's our Go, Go, Go awards presented by our founding partner, 76. We have categorized 4 critical awards that we will continue to celebrate every single weekend, and we want your feedback. We've gotten some amazing feedback already after Jim has kicked out the newsletter and we put it out on social media. But Jim, I'll let you reveal the awards. If you haven't seen our social, please do. We're growing at a pretty good clip, I think, at Y Option on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. But Jim, who won and took home some hardware, at least virtually, this week?
Yeah, so I'll quickly list them off, and then we can kind of have a little banter back and forth on this. So the first award was the My 5-Star QB award for the top quarterback of the week, Miller Moss from USC, for his performance Sunday night against LSU. The big touchdown with about 6 minutes left to give them the lead, and then after LSU tied it, he drove them down the field. I mean, it was really cool to watch. Next, the Go Gone, award. Got to get used to all the verbiage here. But yeah, the Go Gone to T-Mac at Arizona. I mean, he put on a show Saturday night. 2 60-plus yard touchdowns, over 300 yards receiving, 10 catches, 4 touchdowns, setting and tying school records all over the place. Dude was an absolute monster. The That Dude Award, which, it's not always, I think what we're continuing kind of define this as, it's not always about what's on the stat sheet. But for him, not only was it great to see Cam Rising back, but he also did fill up the stat sheet in a little amount of time. He only played the first half and still had a career high 5 touchdowns. And then lastly, our headset hero for the top coaching performance of the week. And that one we gave to Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. They were picked last in the Big 12 media poll back at Media Day. Now, granted, this is not a conference game. This is just their first game as a conference team. But they had a team in Wyoming coming into their house and play. Wyoming won 9 games last year, so it's not just some pushover. And they absolutely dismantled them. They beat them by more than 40 points. 2 defensive touchdowns. And I think kind of the most impressive thing was they didn't allow a point until the final seconds of the game. Wyoming called a couple timeouts just so they could make sure to not be shut out at the end of that game. So kudos to Kenny Dillingham, his staff, and his defensive coordinator, Brian Ward, as well.
Yeah, that was impressive. A big shout out to Sun Devil fan base as well, because they came correct on a hot night in Tempe. And that's been a big part about activating the Valley under Kenny Dillingham. Marcus Arroyo, first year offensive coordinator, really impressive for them in that phase of the game as well. I think when I kind of just rip through that list, let's just start with Miller. What a story, right? We've seen epic stories in week 1 of college football. Miller is near the top in terms of he sat, he waited. He said famously on this podcast a couple weeks ago, he told his mom as he was signing out of high school, the only place I don't want to go is where Caleb Williams goes. And Caleb ends up transferring to USC. Miller does not bolt. He gets not 1, but 2 degrees. Working on a 3rd. I'm going to see him at practice tomorrow, calling the Trojans home opener. Can't wait, because I believe this, and I will say it to start the broadcast. When you sign at SC as a quarterback, you are a household name. And when you start, you are a Heisman candidate. How do you navigate all of that? He's navigated it pretty well through his first 2 starts, Holiday Bowl, and then this past weekend. T-Mac, I'll tell you what, we're going to talk about this a lot all year. We think he's the best receiver in America. And I used to live with the best receiver in the world in Larry Fitzgerald. And now every team knows about Tetron McMillan. He was named our Gone player of the week. He was also named Big 10, I think, Big 12, offensive player of the week. Everybody knows about him. So he's going to be double, triple covered every game. He's going to have to do what Larry Fitz did when he was at Pitt, Jim, which is go up in conflict and keep making plays. We need to find ways to get him the ball. How do you attack different coverages? We will nerd out on how Arizona is finding ways to get the best wide in America, The Rock, because he's going to have to put up some numbers to win the Biletnikoff. You can't just live on one game. That will be a challenge because every team he faces is going to try to take him away. More on that later this week as we dive a little bit more into the Big 12. And then Cam Rising, just warms your heart. He's all over the book, 5-star QB. He had short hair then in his headshot. Now he's got those beautiful locks. But Bad Moon Rising, the alpha's alpha. See him and Brant Keithy, bro, was just beautiful because not only did they have to come back from injury, but you also have to clear the mechanism in between your ears. We've talked to him about it. We'll have him on this podcast throughout this season as well. That was a challenge and one that he went and attacked. And he and Andy Ludwig are operating this offense at a premier level. I get who the opponent was, but the efficiency was there. And I just keep saying, look out. Utah is the favorite in that league. I will be disappointed if they stay healthy, if they are not making noise and either getting a bye in the playoff. I'd love them to host a home game because I think the nation needs to see, even though we keep echoing this, what Rice-Eccles Stadium is about. But they should be able to make some noise in the postseason.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously that was a tune-up game. No one's gonna take the result of Southern Utah and be like, oh, they're back or whatever. It's a warm-up game for better or worse. But we get to see them play Arizona in a couple weeks, and that is going to be a circle game right there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and they got Baylor this weekend.
Yeah,
right, and a non-con as well. So here we go.
That.
Yeah. So, all right, here we go. All right. So with that said, reference the game we have Saturday night. It's going to be really fun. It's a home opener at 8:00 Pacific, right? The Trojans have a ton of juice. To our friends in the South, talking about you, Feinbaum, I'm glad that you ate your own words. You needed to, because what you said was inappropriate, and I've said that. It's not personal, but it's just accurate. Glad SC won. We'll see how consistent they can be on Saturday night. It's a new environment for this team. I think they're a more mature team. 6 starters on defense were this year transfer portal additions. So how do they do? What are they going to do? Well, we talked in this week's episode presented by our founding partner, 76, a guy who's going to have the best view in the house because he's going to be on the sideline on the call in the Big Ten Network. That is Rhett Lewis. You know him from all of his work, decades plus in the National Football League. He's a former walk-on turned scholarship receiver at Indiana under Coach Jerry DiNardo, which is a bunch of really fun ties. He's got a great podcast, which is Believe in Big Ten. That is the Big Ten podcast I listen to every single week just because I trust his evaluation, his voice, his eyes, his lens, and can't wait to hear him come Saturday night because the Collie's cool, Jim, but under the lights in LA after a big one in Hollywood, there ain't much better in the sport. So we'll see if it can become the Mecca again in college football. But to start with that, we bring in Rhett Lewis, presented by our founding partner, 76. It's Rhett Lewis, as we talked about. Rhett, man, I love you. Let's just start with that.
My guy.
Dude, it's been such a joy to have all of us together, right? Guy, you, myself, Denny, our whole crew.
Yeah.
I feel like we've known each other forever. I've known of your work for a really long time.
Likewise.
But to have this conversation, man, I'm fired up, man.
Me too. I appreciate it, man. I love what you're doing here. I love the newsletter on the plane ride home. I was into that immediately on Y Option. Fired up for the weekly awards with a little bit of West Coast pizzazz in that one. So, man, you got me fired up. I appreciate your passion, man, your prep, and then of course you and Guy executing like absolute all-star professionals up in the booth at Autzen, man. It was a pleasure to be a part of.
Well, back at you. Okay, so let's talk about Autzen first. We got a lot to talk about, and I know you've talked about it, and we'll continue to talk about it on your podcast, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah.
Believe in Big Ten football. We're all believers of that now. That's just the way the college football
17-1 this week.
Yeah, I know. Pretty good. Sorry, Minnesota. You were so close. But for you, let's talk about Oregon. We've talked a ton about them. You do a ton of work in the NFL as well. I think they have a lot of players that project well at the next level, but your takeaways, you were field level, you watched them from pregame through the end of it all. What was your takeaways from Autzen?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot that Dan Lanning's going to want his team to go to the doctor on, right? That phrase he uses to go get that work in, and they will. I think the interior of that offensive line definitely has some work to do there, and even the tackles to a certain extent. I think as a group together, there's some cohesiveness that still needs to build there. Maybe that changes when Matthew Bedford gets back healthy. You reinsert him at right guard. Maybe Poncho moves back to center. They've got some ways they can work things out to try to find their best 5, and I think that's still a work in progress there. But here's the facts: 15-3 are absolute dogs. Terrence Ferguson and Tez Johnson. Tez with the 2 tutties. I think Ferg could have caught 10 balls in this game, I feel like. And I loved the running back combination with Jordan James and Noah Whittington, especially Whittington on 3rd down. I thought in pass pro, he really proved a valuable commodity there at times for Dylan. The thing that I was a little surprised by was the lack of explosive plays. And it started early. I mean, like they were marching down the field. but these were more methodical drives than I think we were used to maybe from a year ago, right? When they were putting points up all over the place. Dan Lanning told me as much in that first quarter interview. He was like, Dylan was spreading the ball out 5 different receivers in the first few minutes. And yet, Dan was like, we need explosive plays. We need bodies on bodies downfield to facilitate those explosive plays. So offensively, there's some work to do. I think defensively, they're going to be fine.
Yeah, I think you're right. After watching a bunch of the games back, I was like, all right, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, nobody was flawless. I thought Penn State and USC were the most impressive. Obviously, with week 1, they had the best opponents, right? When you looked at either ranked teams or expectations for a West Virginia team and Garrett Green. For offense, for the Ducks, I'll co-sign on every single thing that you said. And it was just so unique looking down. Like when you're in the booth, you have this iPad next to you that tells you like the drive. And I'm like, dang, 8 minutes and change. Like your point was just like they were just taking what they were allowed to take from that defense, but never really found that rhythm you referenced from a year ago. It'd be like first down, explosive. First down, hustle line of scrimmage, explosive. So we'll see if we see that on Saturday night against Boise. Okay, so I wanted to touch on that real quick, but really for you, like how did you get from there to here on Saturday night in Autzen? Saturday night will be at the Coliseum. But as I've gotten to know you, you have this fascinating path, man.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you contextualize it because I see your bullets. We have our sweet cups of coffee. Shout out to Case Study Cafe in Portland. But how do you contextualize that?
So it was kind of full circle moment for me being on the field in Autzen because 20 years ago I was on the field at Autzen and I was a part of the last Big Ten team to win at Autzen. Okay, the Indiana Hoosiers went in and upset the Oregon Ducks that day. But at that time, I was 2 years into my career. As a college player, as a college receiver, I was a walk-on. Earned a scholarship the next year, actually. And look, I didn't play a ton, and I think it was those moments where I knew, like, I love ball, man. I love ball, but like, I don't know if this is the career in terms of playing ball. So how do I stay around ball, right? Without, how do I stay as close to it as possible if I can't play it? Hamstrings weren't going to let me do it, I don't think. And so, so we moved into the next best thing, which was talking about it, right? Which is something we loved and did just in conversation. And now I get to do it for a living in a lot of different ways, right? And I've discovered in the last 5 years that what my soul had been missing was that greater connection to college football. And for whatever reason, I lost it a little bit. When I got involved with the NFL Network, it was just such a 24/7 process to stay involved in the league, right? And everything that was happening. Tom Allen really brought me back to it, to be honest with you. Like he was so welcoming and the way he ran his program had such open arms with alumni that like I wanted to come back and then eventually became, the radio color analyst for IU Radio. Did that, absolutely love doing that for the last 2 years. But the opportunity to get back onto a TV crew in the biggest conference, to be talking about, different opponents each week, man, it was just too good to pass up. And knowing that I could be there with you guys, man, was just icing on the cake. So yeah, there were some stops in between. I was in Lubbock, Texas with Mike Leach. I was down in New Orleans covering Drew Brees and Sean Payton. Went up to Boston for 5 years and covered every major sports championship that there was in Titletown up there. And then came to NFL Network where this is my 11th season in a variety of different roles for NFL Network. So it's really a blessing, man. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, a lot of follow-ups there for me.
Yeah.
I want to hear about your decision to walk on. People may not know this, but your dad was a lifelong trainer in the National Football League. So you're around locker rooms growing up, you're around training rooms, around players. But to choose to walk on is a conscious choice. And 20 years ago, no NIL fund was paying for anything. Like you were funding dinner. You couldn't even eat with the team unless you wanted to pay a couple grand a month. So how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very thankful to my parents, right? I mean, I'm very thankful, that mom and dad were able to figure out a way to make that happen for me early on, and so it was really emotional, like when you get that call, like when Jerry Bernardo brought me in, I didn't know what was going to happen. Our Big Ten Network colleague right now, who we both love and I still keep in close contact with and have ever since leaving IU. He brought me in and was like, wait, we're putting you on scholarship. And I was just like, holy smokes, got to call dad right after that and be like, Dad, what would you do with an extra 30 grand, And
That's
and
what you
so
said?
yeah,
That was your line?
yeah.
What did he say?
He didn't know what I was talking about. He's like, "Did you just win a scratch off?" I was like, "No, I didn't, but I did win the college football lottery." So I remember, I remember that, man. It was a pretty sweet feeling, and because they've done, I mean, God, so much, and I think we're all in some way, shapes, or form a product of our environment. My environment was football, and I have my dad to thank for that. I got to see, I don't know, 100 New Orleans Saints games from Section 253 in the Superdome, from the time I was 3 years old. Got photos down there on the field with guys like Bobby Hebert and Morton Anderson and Stan Brock and all these legendary New Orleans Saints and Ricky Jackson. Man, it was. I just had to be around ball, and so that's why I wanted to continue my collegiate career, because I thought I could, right? And I wanted to work for that, and so I was happy to be a walk on, and I was happy to be, I was honored to be an Indiana Hoosier, in whatever role, and I was thankful that it turned into something a little bit more impactful.
Ready, set, dream cabin nestled in the woods. Just 4 hours to go. New job halfway across the country. Butterflies before a first date. Wherever you go, 76 fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
And it has turned into a career that's just blossomed. So
Oh,
to all those listening, like, don't eliminate walk-ons, right?
right.
Like, think of, I mean, legit, you and I don't probably have the careers we have. And when we talk about Michigan starting quarterback, at least from week one, he's not there, let alone other stories. The center, Charlie Pickard for the Oregon Ducks. Like,
great one.
It's a beautiful part of the sport. I want to ask another one on that, though.
Yeah.
Because I think that every college player, I was just in Arizona and I talked to their team about this. Like, there's a point in camp where you look to the ceiling and you're like, what am I doing here? And you could be a 5-star quarterback and be like, what am I doing here? As a walk-on, for sure, because your reps are so limited early on. And you've heard me say this, like, any successful person, definitely football player, you have to meet adversity and work your way through it. What was the most adverse element for you in that role in college? And maybe it was post-scholarship, I don't know. But how did you find a way through it?
Staying power was the biggest challenge, because I was that guy in training camp that, I was making plays all over the place, right? And that's not to toot my own horn, but that's to say that, the first,
like, freshman
morning,
year, you're making plays?
Yeah, some. I would say post. I would say the beginning of the Jerry DiNardo era, I was afforded a real opportunity. I mean, we had turnover like Colorado turnover. Like, we had 40 scholarships that were gone. That guys were gone. This wasn't a transfer portal situation. We didn't get that many guys back in, right? They're just guys that left. So there was like this immense opportunity to, like, literally grab the bull by the horns and, like, jump into this two deep. And so that was a huge goal for me. And so I went, spring, kind of worked my way up, and then fall, had opportunities to solidify yourself as a 2D player at wide receiver. And I was making plays. And then, I pulled my hamstring on, a morning practice of 2-a-days in 4 out of 5 camps. And so you have a week of progress and a week of making plays, and then you go 10 days on the sidelines and camp's over and it's game week. And here you are, buried again on the depth chart, because what have you done for me lately? And so I don't know what it was. I mean, obviously my pre-practice routine is not up to snuff. I'd like to think that there's been some advances in that regard now, and maybe I'd be in better shape. But for me, it was, the consistency of, like, and then it would take, 6-7 weeks to work your way back up into the good graces of the coaches, position coaches and coordinators and head coach, and building trust consistently was hard. And then, like, you get into the game, man, and you may get 4 snaps. I was a player that I needed more than 4 to make an impact, unfortunately. And so that was the hardest thing, was, like, really taking advantage of those minimal opportunities when you got them. And I think there was, we could talk about regrets all day long, but I wish there were moments where I'd have prepared a little bit better and, had a little bit more good fortune on some of that stuff. But so thankful for those opportunities and for the chance to be a Hoosier.
I love that. Can't wait to get back to Bloomington with you
Yeah.
and Guy. I mean, we're just going to follow you as you guide us through campus.
I got you, man.
I know you do. Okay, so with that said, I think there's a really fun part of your story that I didn't know about until we started working together. Because I don't know another married couple where they both do the same job in terms of
Right.
being on air. Like, you are talking football, and your
Yeah.
wife, she's, I don't want to say she's talking real life, because football's real life, but
No,
I feel
but
like she's doing news, like real stuff.
We call it hard. Yeah, hard
Yeah.
news. Man.
Hard
I mean,
news.
like, she'll do some fun stories now. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, she's a national correspondent for ABC News and is an anchor for ABC News Live every day from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time, where she's talking politics, talking presidential race, talking anything under the sun. And that is really difficult. So I have the utmost respect and admiration. She is the superstar of the family. Let's not make any mistake about that.
Oh.
She is the most talented, and she is 100% all in on everything she does. So she's inspiring in that way. And we met in Boston. We were working at the same station, right? Love happens in the workplace, and we both met, a little bit later, right? In life, we were married by the time we were 34, 35, I guess. And, I have 2 great kids now. So it was definitely a great little story. And I'm so grateful to Boston. We'll always have a special place in our heart for that.
Amen to that, man. So we do this thing at the Elite 11 when we talk to the top quarterbacks in America. We try to just kind of unearth the concept of, like, everybody's kitchen table is a little different, right? Everybody comes from different backgrounds, has different family scenarios. For you guys, like, you spend your day at NFL training camps, prepping for the college game that we're going to have every weekend. She prepares to spend her day in the studio and in the field that you just referenced. And you have these 2 amazing kids. You're an athlete dad as well. Like, what is life like for you guys at the kitchen table?
It's a circus, man. It is a constant balancing act. In fact, our son, our oldest son, Conway, just asked a really powerful question this weekend while I was gone. And, Kana brought it up to me when I got home and with Conway, and we were talking about him with it. And he was like, why is it that, when daddy gets home, that mommy leaves, or when mommy gets home, that daddy leaves? And it was like, like, that is a really perceptive 7-year-old that's got some questions on, why it's harder for, this family to find time as a family of 4. And there's not a good answer to that, other than, mom and dad are trying to, work as hard as humanly possible to provide the best possible lives, for you and your brother. But that's hard to understand as a 7-year-old, right? It's easier to understand that, wait, there's just 3 of us here today, and there's 3 of us here tomorrow, maybe a different 3. But it's during the football season, a lot of times it's 3, and it's me on Monday through Wednesdays. And Kana doesn't travel as much now as she did, but man, it is sometimes like 2 ships passing in the night. And so we really got to drill down on those days that we're going to have all 4 of us together. And that's why those are so important. And it's important to make time, for that stuff when you are together. So it was hard to watch the USC game yesterday after that. I'll be honest with you. What do you, I mean, like, Conway wants to go play outside at the slip and slide. I'll catch up on the USC game,
Yeah.
And
I hear you. I feel that guilt. I'm not saying you feel guilt, but I felt guilt
I
for
do.
sure.
We all
okay.
do. Yeah.
So we got it together. All right, here we go. Cheers our kombuchas together.
Cheers, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got mine here today. Yeah. Here we go.
I know you do. Right. We're vibing out.
Yeah.
It was a couple years ago. I was at Washington when Kalen DeBoer was head coach, and it was training camp. And, like, I didn't have one of their early games. I probably didn't have to go, but I was like, I gotta go. Like, it's just part of who you are, just to prepare for the season. And, you and I, as the walk-on mentalities, I don't think you ever really lose that. And I can remember for the first time feeling like, we have 2 boys as well, like, torn, like wishing I was in both places and not being where, the phrase, of course, that everybody overuses now is like, where my feet are, where my feet were. And I can remember getting on the train that afternoon, because I, like, literally flew in for the morning practice, flew out at night, trying to be super efficient, but I'm like, they got a soccer game, and I'll miss this, and I'll miss that. And I remember being on the train being like, all right, I have to be better at this. Like, this is not a way, because I'm not going to quit the job that I've dreamt of doing forever. But being a dad clearly trumpets anything else, and being a husband. Sure. And I don't know how it's going to net out, man, but, like, what I chose that day, and I'm trying to continue to, like, even meditate on, is like, when I'm at a game, when we are at a facility, like, being so locked in And then went home being so locked in and knowing, and Ted Robinson, my old partner, would tell me this all the time, like, don't watch the extra reel film. It's never worth it. It's never worth it. And I was like, nah, I'll get it in.
Yeah.
I'll build out my spreadsheet,
Yeah.
but he was right. And I learned that 2 years ago, that lesson from him. And I feel it now. Like the first couple weeks of the season, I was hectic, man, in this new job that we both have.
Sure.
But that's what I love about our crew too, is like you and I could talk about that in front of
Yeah,
a couple thousand people.
I love it. And look, bottom line, Yogi, on that front is, I think even though it's hard to see now, like listening to other stories that have been similar, I think if, Wilder and Conway can say, when they're 18 or when they graduate college and, they start their careers, that they can say, damn, mom and dad worked there, what's off.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to do that too. Like I want to be the best I can be, because I saw mom and dad do it, and I think that would be like the ultimate payoff.
Yeah. Okay. One quick story on that, and then a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
I was 23. I'll never forget it. In Hawaii, I joined the USC staff, and because the team was rolling, like my gut, my memory, which is like almost 20 years ago, told me that like an alum basically flew the staff over for a vacation in Hawaii in the offseason. So they let me kind of tag along. Nice. And I can remember at a dinner that night, I was with Coach Carroll and his wife, Glenna, and I was asking them about parenting. And Pete said something that has stuck with me so deeply. He said, Yog, it's not about getting to the whole game, if it was a Little League game, but it's about not staying in the office to not get to the bottom of the last inning, but competing to get to the bottom of the sixth or the bottom of the seventh. And he's like, that effort is what is going to allow you in this profession or any profession to be able to show up in a meaningful way, for your kids, if you're lucky to have them. Yeah. And that visual, like, hit me. Like I could see my dad walking to my Little League game with like his briefcase and like his loose tie.
Same,
right? And I bet your dad, yeah, you go, coming from practice.
Yeah. That's a great point. And that's a really insightful piece from Pete. That's a good lesson to learn right now, because I'm going to miss a lot of Saturday soccer games, man, this fall.
I know. We got to figure something out. Well, like, same deal. I haven't seen one in a year. Okay. That said, what we are going to see on Saturday is we are going to see the Trojans.
Let's go.
Let's go, dog.
Fight
I mean,
on.
Yeah. You know the phrase, Trojan fans. Fight on. That's right. You were at Texas Tech with Mike Leach.
Yeah.
Famously on his staff. Yes, exactly. He's Lincoln Riley. What do you recall of a young Lincoln, and what will you pull from that to Saturday night's telecast?
I mean, I recall specifically the phenomenon that was Michael Crabtree. And that was when Crab was an absolute sensation. Was catching 2-3 touchdowns a game, was the go-to guy for Graham Harrell, who we might see leading the Purdue Boilermaker offense at some point this year for Ryan Walters. But what I remember is like, dang, man, this dude Lincoln Riley is out here young, like same age as me, coaching college football. I'm out here, making 18 grand trying to, run around with a camera, trying to remember to press record. And he's out here, mentoring a guy who's in the Heisman race. So I was like, I think what I learned initially was what I thought initially was like, damn, this is a good teacher. And this guy is a good developer of talent. This guy's a good coach, like loves ball, loves to coach ball, and is really dang good at it. And so now, as we're watching, Kyron Hudson make the catch of the year in college football. After I thought I saw a guy like Miles Cross make one for Indiana earlier in the day or in the weekend, Kyron took that to another level. Guys like Jacoby Lane, Zachariah Branch, they're in great hands, right? And now look, I know Lincoln's not the wide receivers coach here, but like it's his fingerprints all over this offense, all over this team. So I'm excited to see the development of some of these players that USC is going to count on Saturday night.
Yeah, Dennis Simmons has done such a good job at that position group. All guys that came from the same tree. I don't know about you, but every once in a while I'm like, this would be a fun offense to play in.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
I don't know if either one of us, you might have. I don't think I would have broken the four deep at USC with the receivers that they have, bro.
Not at the time that we were in college, brother. Yeah.
Okay, so take us into the broadcast for you.
Yeah.
When you're down on the field, because you're an analyst, right?
Yeah.
And or you have to like be the eyes and ears. Like there's so many layers to the job.
Yeah.
When you get to the floor of the Coliseum, because that place is different. You work the spring game. I was part of that coverage as well a couple months ago. You've been at practice. We'll have this game under the lights, 8 p.m. 11 p.m. Eastern,
That's right.
8 p.m. Pacific. I learned that last week. That's right. Big Ten. There we go. So for you, what's your process? Like, where do your eyes go? I think listeners are always curious about that.
I don't know yet, man.
Yeah.
I'm still figuring it out. Like it's working at NFL Network and having a much heavier emphasis in our spring coverage, our draft coverage, the last 5 to 6 years has retrained my eyes, I think, right? To, get away from the ball and watch, not necessarily what's going on the offensive line, defensive line, but certainly there too. And then moving from there to, let's see what's happening in the back end, right? And then maybe catching up with, all right, where did the ball end up on replay? But I think it's harder for me right now because I don't, necessarily have the luxury of, watching a replay in real time. So whatever I end up seeing on the field is really all that I can kind of grasp at the moment. And so that's what I'm still trying to figure out. Like, I think maybe it's from here on out, it's probably let's focus on something for a drive, right? And let's really dig in on that for a drive. Maybe it ends up paying off, maybe it doesn't. But I think the narrower the focus, right? You see, you think you're seeing, try to watch everything, you see nothing, right? See a little bit of something and then you see everything. Something, I think there was probably a better worded analogy there, but I think you get
see
the
a
drift,
little,
right?
see a lot, see
there
a lot,
it is.
see a little.
There
you go.
That's it.
Yeah.
Says Yogi. That's why you're the best teammate. So yeah, I think that's what I'm going to work on, narrowing the focus a little bit. And because I think the viewpoint changes at every stadium. That kind of took me by surprise at Autzen, is that, moving back and forth from 20 to 20, I couldn't watch as I went from 20 to 20 because you had to go behind the bench, behind this concrete wall. And it's so loud, you can't really hear what the guys are talking about down there. So it took some time to kind of figure out how things were going. But I think narrower focus is ultimately the moral of the story here.
It seems like there's a prevailing narrative around like college and the NFL and the blurred lines. We've talked about that, you and I, on many of our car rides over the last couple months. When you look at Miller Moss, when you look at Dylan Gabriel, when you look at, you reference Hudson Carr, when you look at, Will Rogers, Will Howard, whomever, Davis Warren, Alex Orji, like you go up and down this league at quarterback and even around the country, Cade Klubnik, Texas and Quinn Ewers. You worked at Manning Academy since I think you were in high school.
Yeah.
You've been there, right? So you've seen everybody. Where do you net out around the position and the next level? Like, is it archaic to be like, he's a great college quarterback?
No.
Period. Or can you be both? Or are you always, the potential for both?
Man, I think that pure arm talent, it's just everybody doesn't have it, right? Yeah. Sure, you can get better at it, right? But like, is everybody going to be able to throw the ball like Quinn Ewers? No. They're just not. Is everyone going to be able to throw the ball like his backup Arch Manning? No, they're not. So I think when you look at that, like there's something pure about throwing the football, about passing the football, and that's always going to be at an ultra premium, right? And so that's like, when I watched, that's why Quinn stuck out to me this summer down at the Manning camp. That's why, Andrew Luck stuck out when he was at the Manning camp, right? I mean, like that was one of the best analogies, not analogies, but one of the best, kind of examples to me of what greatness at the quarterback position was the way in which his ball got to where it needed to be. It wasn't going to knock over a brick wall when it got there. And yet it got there with pace and with accuracy. And not everybody can do that, man. Like, I marveled at the way that Baker Mayfield, the torque in which he threw, throwing hard, right? And I'm not to say that that's the wrong way. It's just, it's different than some other guys He really revs it up, and I think he's changed it a little bit the way now that he's been in the league. But that was just something that I noticed, and so I just think there's no replacement for natural arm talent. And there's guys that can get better at it. There's guys that are natural processors too, and there's a place for that in the league. If you don't have that elite arm talent, you can make up for some of that, with processing ability and seeing defenses and understanding. And I thought that's kind of what we thought might happen with Jack Lane, the quarterback for Idaho against Oregon. They were an inferior roster, didn't play like it. I think Jack, there's definitely some stuff that he would have wanted back in that game, but you can make up for stuff that way. I just don't think that you're going to be a Super Bowl MVP without some semblance of elite natural arm talent.
All right, before we cut you loose, reference the Manning Passing Academy. You spent a ton of time there, like literally 20 some years now.
26 years,
you have 26 years. This is a tough question to probably, surmise in a few sentences, but if you can compete to try, the Manning family, like Peyton, Eli, the dad, brother, the whole 9 yards. How have they influenced how you view the game and specifically the quarterback position?
First family of football, right there. And to me, there's no argument. The way in which they have truly kind of inspired the way that I look at the game is by how they've handled themselves in the game. I remember when Eli retired, it was right around the 100-year anniversary of the NFL, right? NFL 100. And I remember kind of comparing his career to look, he's not going to have the best statistical career of anybody, that goes into the Hall of Fame. And I do believe he's going into the Hall of Fame. His stats don't compare to his brother, but he was one of the best winners in big games that we've seen. Those 2 postseason runs that he went on with the Giants, those years they won the Super Bowl, were incredible. But to me, the way he handled himself and the way that he carried himself as the face of a franchise in the number 1 media market in the world, will always stick with me. Class, team first, individual last, always my fault, always the team's success. That he wasn't, he was born with it, but that was instilled in him, not just by dad, but by mom, Olivia, right? By brother Cooper, by brother Peyton. And so the reason I brought up NFL 100 is because I don't know that Eli Manning would end up on that top 100 list of players to ever play in the league. But if you had to say top 100 faces of the franchise, he's at the top of the list. And so is Peyton. And so is his dad, Archie. And so would Cooper have been if he'd have had the chance to play in the league. And so that's what I think about when I think about them. I think about first-class people, first-class talent, and probably in that order.
Well, I feel the same way about you. First-class human, first-class talent, first-class crew, and it's coming to you live Saturday night at the college. You'll be on the floor.
I wore this today to remind myself, this logo right here.
Yeah.
What a privilege to wear and to hold that Mike flag, to wear that logo on week 1, the biggest college football season ever in the biggest conference ever. That's some up there stuff,
Yeah, I thought about that too. In advance of the game, it's our oldest son Zane is 9, and when he's playing, basketball or handball against the wall outside, I'm like, that was me as a kid, but calling the game.
Yeah.
Right. I just had Guy on the podcast last week, and he talked about talking into a recording device when he was 6 or 7, and his parents had to tell him to stop because he just was talking so much. So all of us as a collective to be able to call this a craft is, Guy's not in his 40s yet, but you and I are. That's really cool. And it's a beautiful opportunity to celebrate the game and coach the viewers every Saturday, man. And it's been a beautiful opportunity to do it with you. And thank you for coming on the show. I know you got a lot. You got those 2 amazing boys, your wife, your life. You do so much. I don't know how you do it. It blows my mind how much is in between your ears, bro. And I can't wait to continue to tap into it all season.
Thanks, brother.
There it is. Rhett Lewis, presented by our founding partner, 76. Jim, I love these conversations that we've been able to have all offseason. Now we are into the season. I trust Rhett with my life, and I trust his eyes from a football standpoint at an insane level. Anything he says he sees, I'm riding with. I just think he knows the game. And how about that story about the Manning family? Who's known the Manning family since they were a teenager and worked with them every single year. This is the Afterglow, where we always talk about the guests we just had, what we wish we asked, and what we learned. So, Jim, what do you think about Rhett Lewis, his first time being on the pod?
Well, it was great. I definitely loved. I wrote it down here. What was the line about winning the college football lottery? I thought that was a great story for him. But the thing I think I related to most was just the part where you guys were talking about balancing this career with being a parent. Like, I can think about like those first several years of the Pac-12 network, and even before, with having young children at that point, of like, I would never see the kids because I was always in the city. But now the last several years, and especially with this, I'm home all the time, which is great, but also can be a challenge when we're trying to record these things. Sometimes we're trying to make sure that, hey, no piano practice right now, or hey, whatever. But it's always good to keep all that stuff in perspective as we talk about what we do.
Yeah, that's well said. I love. It's been really fun talking to all of my partners over the years about family and growing, but now being able to live it with someone like Rhett, our kids are roughly the same age. It's just kind of fun. And he's just he's a phenomenal human. And I think that true connection can be felt over the airwaves. We've only had one game together, but by the end of the year, I hope that the viewers and the fans on the Big Ten Network listen to Guy, who we just had last week on this podcast, listen to Rhett and myself, and feel like we really like one another. Because we do. We hang out all of the time. Okay, so before we cut loose here, I think it's important because we are going to talk about these two teams all year long. Yes, America's teams, Jim. Oregon State, Washington State, two different games. I think when you go back and you watch what the Beavs did and how the Cougs just dominated. But what did you think after watching those two make their debut on the CW?
Well, first of all, it was great to see Yammer back involved in the Pac-12 programming. So that was, a side note there. But yeah, it was cool. I mean, both games, it was, I don't want to say funny, but it was also like both of their opponents scored early, and it was just like, oh no, like, is everything okay? And then from that point on, it was just like, okay, here we come. It's getting off those, getting those early jitters out of the way. But I mean, Washington State put up a 70 spot on there. Obviously, the offense was great. The defense could still use a little bit of work. And then Oregon State, they just ran the ball down their throats. I mean, both running backs had terrific games. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how both of these two teams progress as the competition gets a little bit better. Because as we talked about earlier about Utah, like no one's taking the FCS game and saying, okay, this is what it is. This is what these teams are. We're still learning what these teams are. And I think those teams are still learning what they are. But yeah, I think overall, it's the only conference in America that's undefeated. So.
How about that? How about that?
Or at least in the power conference, right? I guess I should look under some of the smaller conferences, but yeah, people had a little bit of fun with that this weekend. So
yeah, and they should. Look, these are two teams that we've talked about it many times. They're in a position by no fault of their own, and they're finding a way, much like talented quarterbacks, to work their way through adversity. And they did. Adversity early on in the game. It was fun to watch Giovanni McCoy, former Idaho starting quarterback, as we were calling the Idaho game, which was kind of fun. They were both playing within an hour of one another at the same time in the state of Oregon. And then for Wazoo and John Mateer, this is a guy who had a specialty package last year. And after the game, Kyle Williams is calling him like my Heisman quarterback. I love that. College football is back. There's some good smack talking. There's some flexing on who you are and what you're about. And I think for these two teams, every week, the spotlight's only going to grow. And we will talk about that as we get closer to kickoff. But remember, we said it here first. They are America's teams. And we know you have your fan, like Jim Thornby, Arizona Wildcat. That's your number one team. But number 2 and 3, it's the Beavs and the Cougs. It just has to be. That's the way it works, bro.
Well, and you talk about the smack talking. So real quick before we wrap this up, I don't know if we're going to officially call them maybe a Pac-12 Southeast team. But the Miami Hurricanes, I mean...
Cam McCormick.
So let's run down here. Obviously, Mario Cristobal, former Oregon head coach, is the head coach. Has been there a couple of years now since leaving Oregon. Cam McCormick, He was featured on ESPN College Game Day on Saturday morning. It's his 9th year in college football. The former Oregon tight end who was part of the same recruiting class as Justin Herbert. He caught a very fittingly 9-yard touchdown in his only catch of the game. And who did he catch it from? Cam Ward, the former Washington State quarterback, who not only balled out, had people already starting to talk about Cam going to New York City for the Heisman. But then after the game, this is my favorite part. Cam was like, "Yeah, I thought the Swamp was going to be a little bit louder. There was better atmospheres at Austin and the Coliseum." And so kudos to Cam for, even though he is many miles away, still repping the West Coast.
That is awesome.
Over here. And then, Damian Martinez, he didn't have killer stats, but, he was still in the game. And then the one I completely forgot about was, as I'm watching, the 7 games up here, all of a sudden I hear Mish Powell with the interception. I was like, wait, what? I'm like, oh, that's right. So the former UW star, who was basically saved their butts last year against Arizona State with that pick 6, now he's at Miami too. So when you're watching a Miami Hurricane game this year, you will see a lot of Pac-12 influence.
Yeah, that's a great point. Reference a little bit about that in our newsletter over the weekend. Go check that out at yoption.com. From 30,000 feet flying home, we'll give you our takes from the weekend. Miami, I hope they do it. College football is better when Miami is winning, when SC is winning, when some of these blue bloods are having success, especially the ones that have been down. So we will track that, and we will track everything through the lens of the West Coast here at Y Option. For those of you that are supporting us through our paid community, thank you very much. You'll start seeing some of the content behind a paywall as the season goes on. We want to make sure we get everybody into this community. So tell a friend, share it with a friend, and away we go. Again, thank you to 76, our founding partner. Jim, lots of love. Here we go. Week 2 of college football. Peace.